Welcome to a wide open space. Here, our focus is strengthening our faith, cultivating ourselves, and creating lives that we love. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Nichelle Guidry Stewart. Well, hello, and welcome back to A Wide Open Space. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Nichelle Guidry Stewart, and I want to thank you for spending another Saturday with me out here in this wide open space, in this intersection of personal development and spiritual growth and wellness, in this womanist space where Black women are unapologetically centered. And on today's episode, we are talking about the power of prayer in your personal development and your growth journey. Prayer and power, prayer and purpose, you name it. This is where we are going to talk about something that is so seemingly basic, and we take it for granted, that prayer should be an integral part of our habit stacking as we are in the process of becoming women of purpose and destiny. And you would think, right, that, prayer would be a part of our outlines for our lives and our daily practices of keeping ourselves grounded and moving ourselves forward on our paths. But I would venture to say that maybe 6 to 7 out of 10 of the women that I work with, I often have to stop them in the middle of sort of the expression of their anxiety and their fears on their path and just say, well, sis, have you prayed about it? And so in many ways, I feel like a big part of my work as a spiritual wellness coach is like a prayer partner, right? Like I'm somebody that I will always call you back to this question of, well, have you prayed about it? Because I know firsthand the invaluable, indisputable, indispensable power of prayer in this process. And I also know that when you really lock into your process of growing and transforming and living out the purposes and the missions for which you were created, it is inevitable that you are going to hit these obstacles, hit these road stacks, hit these inflection points where the way forward is not clear, or the strategy is not clear, or you sometimes underestimate the strength, the value, and the insight that you already possess from previous chapters. And that is where prayer becomes so cataclysmic and so powerful. And also, I think when I think about the daily habit stacking and the daily rituals and practices that bring life and structure to our time and animate us with purpose and ground us, I often think about well, what kind of time am I making for prayer? I will make time to work out. I will make time for reading. I will make time for making sure that I'm eating good and drinking my water. I will make time for people in my life. But I think sometimes where it's easy to sort of skirt around the habit, forming the habit, keeping the practice is prayer, right? And I'll tell you why I think we overlook prayer. I think we overlook prayer because prayer is such a simple resource and such a simple practice. It is kind of like, if you're into exercise, it's sort of like a catalytic exercise. It's like a push-up or a pull-up or a squat. You don't need any extra equipment for it. You can do it at the drop of a dime, no matter where you are. And if you do it enough over time, the impact of it compounds. And prayer is very similar in that we don't need any external equipment. We don't need any special language. We don't need a particular place and time. We don't need a particular posture. We don't need to say Jesus a certain way. Although all of these sort of layers to ritualizing the ritual and the practice augmented. I think sometimes when we start to think about, I need a special place, I need special words, I need this and that, that's when we start complicating it, and it moves away from the simplicity of at any moment I can tap into the power of prayer to connect with God, to connect with the person, with the presence and the spirit that is greater than me, the insight that is greater than mine, the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding that are deeper than mine, and the plans that are bigger than mine, so that I can connect to them. And that's why I think we overlook the power of simply praying. And I do want to say, I think it's very important as you're growing in your spirit to grow your spiritual practices. If you are somebody who has been walking with God for many years, sometimes you do need those seasons of set aside. I need to pray at a certain time. I need to adorn my surroundings in such a way. I want to include candles, and I want to include an altar. I want to have a prayer group. And I think all of that is very, very important. But if your prayer practice has become so decorated and so elaborate that you have moved away from, at this moment, right now, I can offer up a prayer to God, and things in my life, in my perspective, in my attitude, and in my spirit will shift, then we've missed the point of prayer. And so I want to ground us in some ideas and some quotes, and also a little research that I found from the Harvard Business Review on the power of prayer. I want to come first from, y'all know how I feel about my girl, Susan L. Taylor. She is my spiritual auntie in my mind. And in her book, All About Love, in her essay entitled How to Pray, the great Susan L. Taylor writes the following words: "You are safe, even in the eye of the storm. God will never forsake you or take a break from blessing you and loving you. Your prayers are for remembering that, for affirming it. Your prayers are for you. God doesn't need your prayers or your praise. Nothing you can say or pray will make God love you more. As God's beloved, you have the divine right to live in the many rooms of the mansion, the right to everything to fulfill your needs and obligations. Your prayers aren't for asking, but for affirming your faith. Faith that you, as God's beloved, can be a willing channel for the highest good, and that all your needs are met in the right way at the right time. Praising and thanking don't open God's heart wider. They open yours and fill it with love and gratitude, liberating you from fear, making you wiser, stronger." Just got to give it up to the great Susan L. Taylor for those wise words on the power and the purpose of prayer, right? What she is essentially saying is that prayer is for us. It is a conduit for us to connect and reconnect, and to sort of relieve ourselves of a lot of the stress and the anxiety that can come on the journey of purpose. Speaking of the journey of purpose and the power of prayer, a study was done, or was published rather, some years ago in the Harvard Business Review, and a pool of about 1,700 working professionals and entrepreneurs were polled in this study done by Mitchell Newbert and 3 of his colleagues at Baylor University. And they were investigating the connection between prayer and entrepreneurship. And a study of approximately 1,700 U.S. adults found that 34% of entrepreneurs pray several times a day, compared to 27% of non-entrepreneurs. And it said that entrepreneurs are more likely to believe that God takes a personal investment in them and their business, which helps them to manage their anxieties around their ventures, their risks, and their overall entrepreneurship. It is utilized as a resource in guiding their decision-making under uncertain terms and circumstances, which allowed them as entrepreneurs to feel that they are partnering, once again, partnering with a higher power, with God as a higher power, to create value through their businesses. Finally, In HBR several years later, another study was published around reflection and how business people and entrepreneurs incorporated regular rhythms of reflection in order to reduce stress, in order to incorporate, as I mentioned in the last episode, practices of being able to assess and celebrate their gains as opposed to living in the gap, to use that language from Dan Sullivan again, which generated for them an air and a spirit of gratitude as they were on their journey. And so I want to lift that up as really, really powerful, that as we are pursuing a certain level of destiny and attempting to make a certain level of impact, we have to recognize in that in some way, shape, or form, we are answering to a higher calling. We are answering to a nudge from God, a nudge from the other side, that I've actually endowed you with a supernatural gift set. I have given you this vision, and I'm going to give you the instruction. I'm going to give you the strength and strategy, but I need you to make an intentional connection with me so that you're not shooting in the dark. And that is exactly the purpose that serves prayer. And so let's get into the word. I know that it is not yet Lent, okay? I know that it is not yet Lent, but we are making our way there. But when I think on the absolute power of prayer and manifesting destiny, calling, and purpose, my mind immediately goes to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And in Matthew chapter 26, we see this really heavy scene. This is the night that Jesus was betrayed. This was the night that Jesus was taken into custody. And in those really pivotal moments before his arrest, we see him working so hard with the disciples that he called out his inner circle from his larger circle of disciples. And he asks them to stay awake and pray with him. And we know the story. The disciples are tired, right? Like they just came down from the Last Supper. They may have a case of the itis. It's late at night. And they can't seem to stay awake and keep watch with him. And while they're struggling, he separates himself. Jesus separates himself and says twice, going on a little further, he dropped down on his knees and he began to pray. And one of the gospel renditions even says that he was so stressed and so anxious and so fearful about what was at hand that he began to actually bleed blood. One of the things that I love so much about this particular story and that really ministers to me is that he did not let his fear of the present moment, his anxiety over what he knew was coming, to keep him from praying. And twice, right? In Matthew 26, we're in verses 39 and in verse 42. Let me pull that up for myself. It says, verse 39, going on a little farther, he fell on his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. And yet, not as I will, but as you will." Again, in verse 42, it says, he went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this thing to pass away unless I drink it, may your will be done." And I want to be really, really clear about why this prayer is so powerful. You know, we're living in an age where a lot of theology is so easy, but this is a hard prayer. It's not just hard in its vulnerability. This is not, speak it into existence. This is not name it and claim it. This is a moment of radical, what I would call self-emptying. In my field, we call this a kenosis moment, right? The actual naming that I really don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. That's what he's saying. Let this cup pass from me. And then he goes on to say, and yet not my will, but yours be done. And at a later time, we will talk about how the will of God does not always include ease, and it does not always include, um, it's just not always a straight and linear path. In fact, what we know from the model of Jesus's life, that the path to destiny can be very violent and be very painful and have so many ups and downs and vicissitudes. But Jesus never strayed away from this practice of prayer. Throughout the Gospels, we hear about him stealing away to pray, taking those moments of retreat so that he can renew his energy and renew his spirit. And we also see moments where he's praying in public, such as at the tomb of Lazarus. So we see that prayer absolutely powered his ministry, and it absolutely powered his sense of connection, calling, and fulfillment of his purpose. And that is what I want to lift up to us today, is that each of us are called to some beautiful and profound work. You know, what you're feeling called to, what you're feeling pulled towards, and what you're feeling nudged through. And if you are a person about your business and about your purpose, then you also know that there's no way to fulfill it. There's no way to complete it in your own strength and in your own power. And that, again, is where prayer comes in. So there's two things that I want to unpack about Jesus's prayer here. One is his absolute honesty. I think sometimes one of the reasons why we underutilize prayer is that when we're praying honestly, it really does call us to look into a mirror. And I think prayer is a powerful practice for raising your self-awareness, because prayer is obviously your time to connect with God. But prayer is also a way to connect with yourself, to be honest and to be truthful about where you stand, what you need, what you're afraid of, what you're anxious about. And I know that a lot of us were probably taught to posture a little bit in prayer, to once again evoke these familiar prayer phrases. And, when you really get in the throes of life, right? Life happening, if you will, you find that sometimes the truest thing that you can say is a sigh or a cry. And I think we have to be able to express, like, this is a part of my process too. It's either that or internalize it, right? And then the other piece that I want to pull out about Jesus's prayer is that he surrendered. Not my will, but yours be done. And I think one of the things that I always think about with Jesus is how he was so locked into God and so walking in such deep synchronicity with the purposes for his life, that even in this, his hardest moment, his commitment was still to walking in that obedience and alignment. And I think if we're going to align ourselves, right, for the blessings and the overflow, we also have to understand that when we say yes to God, we don't know everything that we're signing up for. And so prayer is the place where we kenosis, right? Where we self-empty, the full expression of whatever it is that you're feeling, whatever it is that you need, whatever it is that you're going through. You got to be honest about it. And I think in the emptying, right, we create space for God to then refill and for God to then reveal. That's when I believe the really game-changing creativity, the game-changing strategy, the shifting of the perspective then happens through prayer, right? When we partner with God, where we commune with the Spirit of God, and all of a sudden you're thinking new thoughts. You find that your emotions that were just on 10 have been quieted. You find that you're in a better place, more clarity, more assuredness. And you can rise from the place of prayer, ready to face whatever it is. And we hear this all the time, and we see this in the model of Jesus, that prayer may not change your circumstances. I don't think that's the point of it. But prayer will change you so that you can move through the circumstances with some more power, some more creativity, some more insight, some more wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and some more spiritual power. Like Susan L. Taylor said, praising and thanking doesn't open God's heart wider. They open yours. And they fill it with love and gratitude, she says. And I would just add, they fill it with the insight that you need, with the strategy that you need, with the next step that you were wondering about. You ever prayed about something and all of a sudden you need to go speak to this person? Or some outlandish idea that was like, I know I didn't think that myself. That's God giving you divine strategy. And that is why I always think to myself, why do we underutilize it? There's one of my favorite hymns of all time is called What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And one of the lines that will always stick out to me is, oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pains we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. The big things, the little things, the really big mountain type things, the magnanimous things, and then especially even those minute things. I have been doing a lot of praying lately. 2025 really shook up some things for me professionally and vocationally. And I was praying to God about, what is ministry supposed to be looking like right now? And how do I move forward in, my vocation, my career? And it was through prayer and also through conversation that I had with some prayer partners and some coaches that I landed back on here on this podcasting piece, this piece that I've always somewhat kind of had in my back pocket and loved to do. And we're thinking through the long-term strategy for this. But it also got me to just sort of imagining, if I got off of the super linear path, right? Or the sensical path, or even the path that I have witnessed in my predecessors and my models and my muses and mentors, what could my career look like? And I found that prayer is such an amazing portal to daydreaming, dreaming, and imagining, because the vision of God is so much bigger. And so much more colorful and vast and exciting than sometimes what we put ourselves on autopilot to do and how we put ourselves on autopilot to perform. So that being said, let's go to your prayer practice this week. This week, I want to just challenge you to take your prayer practice and let's put some things into writing. Okay. This exercise is called the Focused Prayer Journal. And what my challenge to you is going to be this week is, if you don't have a practice of writing down your prayers, if you don't have a practice of keeping some kind of an archive of, you and God's relationship and God's work in your life, this week is a great opportunity to practice. And I want to be very clear that I am joining you as a novice if you're going to be doing this for the first time. Just this year, I have started adopting a practice of writing down 3 wins a day, 3 gains a day at the end of the day. And so now that I feel like I've gotten into that rhythm and that practice, I think I want to start stacking that with writing out some prayers. And so here is this focused prayer journal exercise that I have designed for this week. I want us to just focus on one prayer request. And in particular, sis, I want you to really focus on a prayer request that has to do with your work, your vocation, your calling, your purpose, or even your identity, because we know that all of these things focus from your sense, a clear sense of who you are. And I just want you to write about this one thing. You might want to write about clarity about your next vocational or professional move. You might want to write about wisdom about a decision that you're having to make, courage to step into an opportunity that has been presented to you, that may scare you a little bit. You may want to circle the prayer for a breakthrough on a project or a vision that you've had. You may want to circle a prayer for discernment over a decision that you've been looming on and kind of praying through, or strength to navigate some kind of difficulty in your life, or even direction, right? Discernment or direction for your next steps. And I want you to write this prayer request very clearly in your journal or in your notes app, whatever you have. I want you to just start a new page, start a new note, and write that prayer request right at top. I want you to write exactly what you are asking God for. Take up space with this. Get as detailed and honest and vulnerable as you can. Your prayer is personal. It is between you and God. You go into as much depth as you feel that you need to go. Well, that's day 1. Okay. So days 2 through 7, I want you to actually track what is the daily revelation here. Each day for the next 6 days, I want you to spend time around this prayer request when you go to God. And then this is crucial. This is so crucial. I want you to actually write down, what is God saying? What is God revealing? And I think keeping a practice of circling your prayer also calls us to a heightened level of attentiveness throughout the day. Keeping, this prayer request in mind, what's coming up around you, what just keeps coming up in conversation. Something may come up in your feed. Something may come on the radio. You may be grocery shopping and something aligns or speaks to this prayer request. I want you to track those. Track how God is speaking to you. Track the vehicles that God is utilizing to speak to you, so that you can begin to engage in prayer as an ongoing conversation. It is not unidirectional. Prayer is deeply, deeply, deeply conversational. And so when you go back to your focused prayer journal, I want you to track a couple of things. What revelation, insight, or nudge came today about the request that you made? What is God showing you that you didn't see yesterday? What's becoming clearer? Do you have any questions that are emerging? And what next step is God perhaps calling you to? The goal is not to get an immediate answer on day 2. The goal is to go deeper into discernment day by day, to notice how God is progressively speaking back to you, to see what patterns are emerging, and to track how your understanding around this request, around this situation, around this opportunity is evolving each and every day. All right. Finally, when we get to day 7, I want you to enter into a time of reflection. I want you to look back. I don't want you to think about what hasn't come. I don't want you to think about, I'm still confused. I still don't know what to do. I want you to look over the written record from this week. And I want you to acknowledge how you have gotten closer to clarity or come fully into clarity over the course of these days where you have been paying closer attention to how and what God is saying. So read back through your journal on day 7, and I want you to notice the following. What themes emerged across this week? How did your understanding of this prayer request shift from day 1 to day 7? What has become more clear that wasn't clear before? What is God inviting you to do, be, or even release? And finally, what's going to be your next step? I believe that this practice is going to teach us that prayer is not a one-time transaction where we just simply saddle God with our requests for something and we either don't get it or we do. But prayer, rather, is a progressive conversation. It is a relationship. It is a place of ongoing revelation, deepening our dependence on God for our direction and our discernment, and deepening our clarity for what we're called to do and who we're called to be. Because it's simply not my belief that this path of purpose and destiny has been laid out for us to live out, and we have to spend our lives shooting in the dark. Sometimes we do shoot in the dark, but other times I believe we can shoot with straight precision if we talk to God and we pray about what we're up to and how we need to go about it. And so remember, sisters, prayer is your primary site. It's the first place where you connect with God. It's where we self-empty and we become filled again. It's where we find the courage to press forward in this path to destiny. You cannot become everything that you are called to be in your own strength and in your own power. So practice prayer a little bit every day. Focused prayer, expectant prayer, and then engage in rituals and rhythms of reflection so that you can catch the revelation and not miss it. So as we prepare to wrap up today, I hope this episode reminded you that underneath all of your personal development work, underneath all of your professional development work, the goal setting, the vision boarding, the boundary setting, the networking, everything underneath it all and over it all and around it all is prayer. Prayer is our foundation. It is the place where we partner with God. It is the source of our power. Like Jesus in that garden, we bring our honest questions and fears to God. We self-empty by saying our truth, and then we surrender. And yet not my will, but yours be done. And we become filled with what we need for the next leg of the journey. So this week, practice that focused prayer practice. Get into that journal, get into that notes app. Choose that one request about your work, your purpose, your calling, your destiny, and really focus on this one thing, because I think the point of this practice is to go deeper and not wider. Track what God is revealing to you day by day and watch how prayer will transform you so that you can move through life and get to destiny and purpose. I want to thank you for spending this Saturday morning with me in this wide open space. Please, if this episode resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and most importantly, please share this podcast with another sister who needs to hear this message. I want to thank you for tuning in today, and I can't wait to reconnect with you in this wide open space. Have a great, great, great day.